My parents said watching my son for 4 hours was too much, while they were planning a week-long Disney trip for my brother's kids. So I cut them off in a way they'll never recover from. My parents dropped off my brother's kids, but said watching my son for 4 hours was too much. So I cut them off in a way they'll never recover from. I, a 32-year-old male, am what you would call a family disappointment. Not because I am a failure. Quite the opposite, actually. I am a civil engineer who owns a small construction consulting firm. The disappointment comes from the fact that I am not my younger brother, Ryan, who is 29. I have spent my entire life living the shadow of his supposed potential, watching my accomplishments be diminished and dismissed while his smallest efforts were celebrated like Olympic victories. It was not always easy to recognize the pattern. When you grow up in a household with such blatant favoritism, you start to believe there is something special about your sibling that you are missing, some quality that makes them more deserving of love and attention than you are. It took years of therapy after leaving home to understand that the problem was not me. It was a toxic family dynamic my parents had created. Let me paint you a picture of my childhood. A series of moments that individually might seem small, but collectively formed the narrative of my place in the family. When I was 8, Ryan broke our mom's grandmother's china, a family heirloom that had been carefully preserved for generations. Mom had always told us how precious it was, how it had survived the journey from Europe with her ancestors. When Ryan sent it crashing to the floor during one of his tantrums, our parents simply said, "Accidents happen." They comforted him as he cried, telling him it was just old stuff. Anyway, 3 weeks later, when I accidentally broke a regular dinner plate while drying dishes, they lectured me for nearly 1 hour about being more careful in the cost of things, making me do extra chores to pay it back. At 16, after months of late nights perfecting my project, I won the state science fair with an innovative water filtration system. The judges said it showed exceptional promise for real-world applications. My science teacher called my parents personally to tell them how proud they should be. The ceremony was scheduled for 2 o'clock in the afternoon on a Saturday. My parents promised they would be there, but at noon they informed me they could not make it because Ryan had a soccer game, a regular season game where he was benched the entire time, as he had been all season. I accepted my award alone, watching other kids celebrate with their families while I stood off to the side, my certificate clutched in trembling hands. When I was 18, I received a full-ride scholarship to one of the top engineering programs in the country. The letter arrived on a Tuesday, and I could not wait to share the news at dinner. When I announced it, expecting at least some acknowledgement of the achievement, their response was lukewarm. Well, engineering is a safe choice, I guess. Ryan's so creative with his music, they said. They then spent the rest of the meal discussing Ryan's upcoming recital at the local coffee shop. The scholarship that would save them tens of thousands of dollars in tuition was barely mentioned again. At 22, I graduated summa cum laude with a degree in civil engineering, already having job offers from 3 prestigious firms. My parents did come to the graduation, but they spent most of the ceremony on their phones, texting Ryan about his band set up for their gig that night. They left immediately after my name was called, not even staying for the reception or to meet my professors, who wanted to congratulate them on raising such a dedicated student. They were more concerned about making it to the local bar, where Ryan's band was playing to an audience of maybe 20 people. When I started my own company at 25, having saved every penny and worked 80-hour weeks at a larger firm to learn the business, my mom questioned my decision. Isn't it risky? Maybe you should just work for someone else like Ryan does at the music store. Never mind that Ryan's job at the music store was part-time, paid minimum wage, and mainly allowed him to use the recording equipment after hours for his own projects. My business plan, market research, and the contracts I had already secured meant nothing compared to Ryan's stability at a job he could barely maintain. Ryan was a golden child who could do no wrong despite his track record of failure and dependency. He dropped out of college 3 times. First from the music program at State University because the professors just didn't understand his style. Then from community college because the curriculum was too restrictive for his creativity. And finally from an online program because it was taking time away from his band practice. Each time my parents consoled him, assuring him it was not his fault and that higher education just isn't for everyone. They funded each of these attempts fully, including buying him new equipment he claimed was necessary for his studies. He lived at home until he was 27, occupying the largest bedroom, which my parents renovated twice to accommodate his studio needs, complete with soundproofing that cost him thousands. He had approximately 0 life skills. He could not cook beyond microwave meals, never learned to do laundry properly, and had to call my dad whenever a light bulb needed changing. But he played guitar and was following his dreams. So apparently that made him better than me, the boring son who just built things for a living, who designed infrastructure that thousands of people use daily, who created jobs and contributed tangibly to society. Growing up, I watched Ryan get everything handed to him on a silver platter, while I scraped by with the bare minimum. A new guitar for Christmas, of course. Not just any guitar, but a $1,200 Gibson, that he had been eyeing. A new amp for his birthday? Absolutely. A professional grade setup that most hobby musicians could only dream of. A complete drum set to round out his sound despite having no knowledge of percussion. Why not? Meanwhile, I worked at the hardware store after school from age 16, putting in 20 hours a week while maintaining my 4.0 GPA just to buy my own graphing calculator for AP classes because my parents said it was too expensive at $120. I saved for months to buy a decent laptop for college, while Ryan was given a top-of-the-line MacBook for his music. When I finally gathered the courage to point out the disparity in how we were treated, sitting my parents down for serious conversation. During my college sophomore year, my mom patted my hand condescendingly and said, "But Marcus, you're so responsible. We don't need to worry about you like we do with Ryan. You've always been so self-sufficient." My father nodded in agreement, adding, "Ryan needs more support to find his way. You've always known your path." Translation, you are the workhorse. He is the show pony. You exist to pull the cart. He exists to be admired. Your purpose is to achieve, so we can pay for his failures. Your stability is not a virtue to be rewarded, but an expectation to be exploited. Fast forward to now. I have managed to build a successful life despite my parents' lack of support, though not without some personal hardships along the way. I am divorced after catching my ex with her work colleague. Yes, that old story that never gets less painful, no matter how common it is, and have joint custody of my amazing 6-year-old son, Tommy. The divorce was ugly and expensive, emotionally draining in ways I could not have prepared for. But I fought with everything I had for 50-50 custody because Tommy is my world, my reason for pushing forward even on the darkest days. The divorce itself could be its own post, a cautionary tale about trusting the wrong person and rebuilding your life from the ashes of betrayal. I had been on a business trip to oversee a major project in Phoenix, a 3-day visit that got cut short when the client signed a contract early. Excited to surprise my wife with the good news and the commission that would follow, I caught an earlier flight home. I still remember the sinking feeling in my stomach as I pulled into our driveway, seeing an unfamiliar car parked there. Part of me knew instantly, but another part tried to rationalize. Maybe it was just a friend visiting. Maybe she had called someone for company while I was away. I opened our front door quietly, hearing music playing upstairs. As I climbed the stairs, I heard laughter. Her laughter, but different, somehow more uninhibited than I had heard in months. I found him in our bed, the bed we had saved for months to buy when we first got married, the bed where Tommy had been conceived. Her work colleague, Jason, whom I had met at company parties, whom I had invited into our home for dinner just weeks before, was with my wife in the most intimate way possible. The scene that followed was both ridiculous and heartbreaking. Her shock, his scrambling for clothes, my eerie calm as I simply turned and walked out, driving aimlessly for hours until I could think straight. When I returned, she was alone, crying, full of excuses about how I was not emotionally available and how she had needs. Classic justifications that did nothing to mend what had been irreparably broken. She tried to take me for everything in the divorce, a viciousness emerging that I had never seen in our 8 years together. She claimed I was an absent father because I worked too much, conveniently forgetting that my work had provided the comfortable lifestyle she had grown accustomed to. The vacation she posted about on Instagram, the private preschool Tommy attended. The judge fortunately saw right through her accusations, especially when I showed up with 3 years of meticulously documented school events, soccer practices, doctor's appointments, and bedtime stories logged in both digital calendars and a physical journal I had kept, a habit I developed precisely because of my own childhood experiences of being overlooked and diminished. I was determined that Tommy would never doubt his importance in my life, never question whether he mattered. The evidence was overwhelming, but the legal battle still cost me $50,000 in fees, depleting a significant portion of my savings and forcing me to take out a loan against my business to cover the costs. Ryan finally got his act together at 27, married Brittany, a sweet girl, way too good for him, and they have twin 4-year-old boys. He works as a music coordinator at a local church, basically play guitar on Sundays and running a youth band. My parents, Dad, 65, and Mom, 62, are retired. Dad worked as a middle manager at a paper company, and Mom had a part-time gig as a receptionist at a dentist's office. They're always complaining about money, but somehow manage to maintain their lifestyle. Here's the kicker. For the past 5 years, I have been sending them $800 monthly to help with bills. I started this when Dad retired because they claimed Social Security was not enough. Me being an idiot who believed in helping family did not think twice. They sold me the sob story about how Dad's pension got cut, how Medicare did not cover Mom's prescriptions, how the house needed repairs they could not afford. I fell for it. Hook, line, and sinker. Family helps family, Dad would say. Funny how that only went one direction. Last month, I enrolled in an executive MBA program to grow my business. Classes are on weekends, which works with my custody schedule. Then I got selected to present at a major industry conference, a huge opportunity that could lead to contracts worth millions for my firm. The presentation was on a Wednesday at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and I had Tommy that week. This conference was the International Construction Management Summit. Getting selected to present is like being invited to pitch directly to every major player in the industry. My topic, innovative cost reduction in municipal infrastructure projects, is boring to most people, but these contracts could set my company up for the next decade. My regular babysitter had a family emergency. Her mom had a heart attack, which was totally understandable. My backup was sick with the flu. I called 3 daycare centers, but they were all full. I even considered bringing Tommy with me, but a 6-year-old at a professional conference was not going to work. I needed someone to watch Tommy from 12 to 4 o'clock in the afternoon. That was it, for hours. I called my parents, who lived 25 minutes away in a nice suburban house that I later learned is mortgaged to the hilt. They're always posting on Facebook about being blessed grandparents and how family is everything. When I called my mom, I explained the situation and asked if they could watch Tommy for those few hours. She immediately made excuses about Wednesday not being good for them. When I asked if something was wrong or if they had a doctor's appointment, she mentioned my father's knee bothering him and that they were trying to rest more. I emphasized it was just 4 hours that I could drop him off and pick him up, and that he just needed lunch and someone to watch him play with his Legos. She refused, suggesting I ask Ryan instead. When I reminded her that Ryan works Wednesdays, she simply said, "Well, I'm sure you'll figure something out. You always do." That last line, "you always do," was the story of my life. Good old reliable Marcus will figure it out. He always does. I had to cancel the presentation, losing the opportunity. The company went with another firm. My business partner later heard to the grapevine that our competitor landed contracts worth $2.8 million from that single presentation. For days later, I was having lunch with a client who showed me pictures from their recent Disney World trip. As they were scrolling, I saw a familiar face in the background of one photo. My parents at Disney World with Ryan's twins. I literally choked on my sandwich. The client thought I was having an allergic reaction. I asked them to scroll back, and there they were, clear as day, wearing Mickey Mouse ears and grinning like idiots. I checked Instagram, and sure enough, Brittany had posted a whole album, Magical Week at Disney, with the best grandparents ever. Thanks, Mom and Dad, for making this happen. 7 days. They spent 7 days at Disney World with Ryan's kids, but could not watch my son for 4 hours. The photos showed them at character breakfast on private very important person tours, wearing matching Disney merchandise, having dinner at expensive restaurants, using FastPass for everything, and staying in a suite at the Grand Fine. I counted the pictures. 247 photos across multiple posts. You know how many pictures they have with Tommy on their social media? 12 total ever. I did the math. This trip cost at least $15,000. The worst part was in one video where I heard my mom saying, "We've been planning this for months. The boys deserve such a special treat." They had been planning this for months, while I had been coordinating schedules for weeks to make sure they knew when I would need help. I called my mom without pleasantries. I immediately mentioned seeing their Disney trip. After a long pause, she admitted she was going to tell me about it. I confronted her about spending 1 week at Disney, but being unable to watch Tommy for 4 hours. She dismissed me as being dramatic, saying Ryan's boys have been having a hard time adjusting to preschool, and they wanted to do something special. When I asked about when they last did something special with Tommy, she claimed they see him. I challenged her to name one time in the last 6 months, and she could only mention Christmas, when they stopped by for 20 minutes to drop off a $10 toy while bringing Ryan's kids full gaming systems. As the conversation escalated, she insisted they loved all their grandchildren equally. I informed her that the $800 I'd been sending monthly would stop immediately. She was outraged, saying they depended on that money. When I pointed out they seemed to have plenty for Disney trips, she insisted that was different, that Ryan needed this. I simply said I had needed 4 hours and ended the call, blocking both their numbers afterward. The first week after our confrontation brought silence, beautiful, peaceful silence. I actually slept better than I had in years. During the second week, Ryan began texting me, clearly panicked about what was happening with our parents. "Mom and Dad are freaking out. What did you do?" he texted, followed by a dozen more texts, each more desperate than the last, mentioned they could not pay their mortgage and that my mother was crying constantly. I ignored him, thinking this was destroying them, and that was good. By the third week, extended families started reaching out. My parents were apparently telling everyone I had abandoned them for no reason. I did not respond yet, as I was gathering ammunition. My cousin Jennifer texted that my mom had called her mother crying, saying I cut them off out of nowhere. My aunt emailed saying this was not like me and that my parents were worried sick. My uncle left a voicemail asking me to call him because my folks were in bad shape. I documented every message, call, and text, building my case methodically. In the 4th week, I received a call from an unknown number. It was my dad. He said we needed to talk about the money, revealing that my mother was having panic attacks, and they could not pay their bills. When I questioned how they could afford Disney, but not bills, he claimed it was a special occasion and a one-time thing. I told him I looked at Mom's Facebook and seen cruises, weekend trips, and new furniture, a lot of supposed one-time things. When he insisted they were my parents and I could not just cut them off, I simply replied, "Watch me." Being analytical by nature, engineer, remember? I decided to do some digging. What I found was illuminating. I hired a private investigator, which may sound extreme, but I needed the truth. What he found was a gold mine of financial irresponsibility. My parents had refinanced their house 3 times in the last 10 years. They had $150,000 in credit card debt. They were leasing 2 luxury cars, a BMW for Dad and a Mercedes for Mom. They maintained a country club membership costing $500 monthly. Mom had a shopping addiction, spending an average of $2,000 monthly on clothes and jewelry. Dad's golf habit cost about $400 monthly just in green fees. They had also been giving Ryan about $1,000 monthly to help with the twins. The real kicker was discovering they had been telling different stories to different people to get money. They told my aunt they needed help with medical bills, told my uncle their roof was leaking, told their church friends they were struggling with utility bills, and told their neighbors they were supporting a sick relative. They had been running a con game on the entire family, and I was the biggest mark. My parents called a family meeting at my aunt's house. They did not invite me, but my cousin texted me about it. They were apparently trying to get relatives to pressure me into giving them money again. I crashed the meeting with receipts. Literally, I walked in with a briefcase full of documents. The room went silent, and Mom started crying immediately, her go-to-manipulation tactic. I announced that since they were all discussing my supposed cruelty, I would share some facts. I brought bank statements showing my payments to them, screenshots of their Disney trip, their credit card statements, public records from a court filing I found, a spreadsheet showing where their money actually went, photos from their various vacations over the past year, and a sanitized version of the PI's report. I laid everything out on my aunt's dining table, like I was presenting a case in court. I explained that for 5 years I had given them $800 monthly, a total of $48,000. In that same time, they had spent over $200,000 on vacations, luxury items, and bailing out Ryan. Yet, they could not watch my son for 4 hours. My aunt, Dad's sister, went pale and asked if this was true. My dad could not even look at her. His silence was damning. I continued explaining that they told me they were struggling with bills, told everyone they were barely getting by, while living like lottery winners. My uncle stood up, face red, outraged that he'd given them $5,000 the previous year, because they claimed they might lose a house. My aunt revealed she had given them $3,000 for my mother's supposed surgery. Another cousin admitted lending them $2,000 for emergency car repairs. The room erupted as years of lies unraveled in real time. Mom tried to play the victim, sobbing about how nobody understands the pressure we've been under, while Dad just sat there defeated. Ryan, who had been silent, finally spoke, asking if it was true that the money he thought they were giving from their retirement was actually for me. The look on his face when he realized he had been an unwitting accomplice in their scheme was priceless. 2 weeks later, I was served legal papers. My parents were suing me for financial abandonment and breach of verbal contract. They claimed that because I had been giving them money for 5 years, I had created a dependency and could not legally stop. Their lawyer was some ambulance chaser who probably took the case for a percentage. I hired the best contract attorney in the state, who laughed when he saw their filing, calling it the legal equivalent of a toddler's tantrum. We countersued for fraud. They had been telling people I was not helping them to get money from relatives and harassment. Then they tried to sue for grandparents' rights to see Tommy. The problem is in our state. Grandparents' rights only apply if they had an established relationship with the child. Thanks to their own neglect of Tommy, they had no case. The judge seemed annoyed at their lawyer, questioning how they could want visitation rights for a grandchild they could not babysit for 4 hours. Their lawyer tried to argue that I was alienating them from Tommy. My lawyer provided 3 years of text messages where I invited them to Tommy's events, all declined or ignored. School records showing they had never attended a single function. Character statements from Tommy's teachers, saying they had never met his paternal grandparents, and a log showing they had seen him for less than 10 hours total in the past year. My mom, being the boomer, she has decided to take the fight to Facebook. She started posting about how her ungrateful son had abandoned his family and how they were struggling to survive. Her posts included statements like, "When you give your child everything and they abandon you in your golden years, and praying for my son to find his way back to God and family, and some people forget where they came from. We're heartbroken, but we still love our misguided son." I did not engage directly. Instead, I created a simple website, The Real Story of Robert and Carol, not their real names. I posted every receipt, screenshot, and financial document. I included a timeline showing every time they chose Ryan's kids over Tommy, every vacation they took while claiming poverty, every relative they had scammed, and every lie they had told. I made it look like a professional news site with a clean layout, just the facts, no emotion, pure documentation. I then shared the link as a comment on her posts. The reaction was swift. Their friends started asking questions. Relatives demanded their money back. Their church, where Ryan works, started distancing themselves. Comments on her posts went from praying for you to, "Is this true, Carol?" to "I can't believe you lied to us." The lawsuits were dismissed, obviously, but the legal fees bankrupted my parents. It turns out spending all your money on luxuries does not leave much for lawyers. The family meeting had opened everyone's eyes. My aunt and uncle demanded their money back. When my parents could not pay, they sued. Other relatives followed suit. Ryan tried to intervene, calling me and begging me to help them, insisting they were our parents. When I questioned whether they were acting like parents when they watched his kids for 1 week, but could not spare 4 hours for mine, he claimed it was different. When pressed on how he insisted his kids needed that trip, I informed him that I had needed that presentation, which cost me millions in contracts. Ryan was shocked, having been told by our parents that I was being dramatic about some little work thing. He had no idea about the conference or the lost opportunity. Ryan admitted that his wife Brittany had been saying something seemed off about the money they received from our parents, noting it did not add up with them being retired. That is when the final piece clicked for him. The house of cards collapsed quickly. The bank foreclosed on their house. Their cars were repossessed. The country club banned them and sued for unpaid dues. Their credit cards were maxed out and Ken-led, and they had to declare bankruptcy. The best part was that during the family meeting, Brittany discovered they had been giving Ryan money. She was furious. They had been struggling to pay their own bills while Ryan was taking money from our parents instead of working more hours. Brittany gave Ryan an ultimatum: cut them off or divorce. Ryan chose his marriage. My parents lost both sons in one fell swoop. Their golden child finally saw them for what they were. Last month, almost 1 year after the initial confrontation, and months after the legal and social media battles had largely subsided, my phone displayed an incoming call from a number I did not recognize. Normally, I would let unknown calls go to voicemail. Too many spam calls these days. But something, perhaps a lingering vigilance about my parents finding new ways to reach me, made me answer. "Hello," I said cautiously, half expecting a robotic voice offering to extend my car warranty. "Marcus, son, please." The voice was ragged, diminished, but unmistakably my father's. He sounded older than his 65 years, his characteristic confidence replaced by something I had never heard from him before: genuine desperation. I felt a complex surge of emotions, anger still simmering beneath the surface, a reflexive concern that had been conditioned into me over decades, and a strange emptiness where familial love should have resided. "Who is this?" I asked, though I knew perfectly well, wanted to force him to identify himself, to acknowledge that he was now a stranger who needed to introduce himself rather than someone who could assume connection. "Don't play games," he rasped, a hint of the old impatience breaking through the veneer of supplication. "We were living in our car." The admission seemed to pain him physically. Each word dragged reluctantly from his throat. "Sounds uncomfortable," I replied, my voice deliberately neutral, neither sympathetic nor mocking, just stating a fact the way he had stated facts about my insufficiencies throughout my childhood. There was a pause filled only with his labored breathing. When he spoke again, the desperation had returned, pride momentarily subsumed by necessity. "We need help, just enough to get a small apartment. Nothing fancy, just so we're not on the street." "I thought you had plenty of money," I said, unable to resist twisting the knife slightly. "That's what you told everyone on Facebook, that I was exaggerating your financial troubles to justify abandoning you." Another pause, longer this time. We made mistakes. We're sorry." The apologies sounded rehearsed. A line delivered without genuine understanding of what he was apologizing for. Sorry they got caught. Sorry their schemes collapsed. Sorry they were facing consequences. But not sorry for the years of manipulation, the emotional damage, the disregard for Tommy. "Are you sorry? Are you sorry you got caught?" I asked, voicing the thought directly. The silence that answered my question was damning in its length and discomfort. Finally, I decided to cut to the heart of the matter. "Let me ask you something, Dad. If you hadn't gotten caught, if I kept sending money, if everyone hadn't learned the truth, would you have ever spent time with Tommy? Would you have ever treated him like you treat Ryan's kids?" "Of course." He responded too quickly, the answer hollow in its automatic defensiveness. When I pressed, refusing to let him off the hook with vague assurances, he stammered. We were going to. Unable to complete the lie convincingly. We both knew the truth. They had never intended to invest in a relationship with Tommy. He was collateral damage in their campaign to elevate Ryan's family, while extracting resources from me. "No, you weren't," I said quietly. "You know what? I'll help you exactly as much as you helped me when I needed you. I'll give you exactly what you gave Tommy when he wanted grandparents who cared about him. Nothing. I heard rustling on the line, and then my mother's voice replaced my father's shrill with indignation. You're going to let us be homeless? The caps lock voice? I thought absently. The digital equivalent of her screaming at me as she had so many times in childhood when I failed to live up to her impossible expectations. You let my son feel worthless, I replied, my voice remaining level despite the emotion rising in my chest. You made him think he didn't deserve grandparents who cared. Tell me honestly which is worse. He's just a child, she shrieked, abandoning any pretense of rational discussion. He doesn't understand. You're right, I agreed, surprising her into momentary silence. He doesn't understand why his grandparents don't love him. He doesn't understand why they could spend 1 week at Disney with his cousins, but couldn't watch him for 4 hours so his dad could advance his career. He doesn't understand why Christmas at your house means expensive gift and attention for Ryan's kids, and an afterthought $10 toy for him. Do you want me to explain it to him? Do you want to tell him it's because he's not Ryan's kid, and in this family, that's all that matters? That's not true, she protested, her voice suddenly small. We love Tommy. Love is action, Mom, I said. Love is showing up. Love is making someone a priority. You and Dad have never done that for Tommy or for me. I sighed, suddenly exhausted by the circular conversation, by the decades of same patterns playing out again and again. I have to go now. Tommy's waiting for me to help him with his science project. Unlike some people in his life, I keep my promises to him. I hung up without waiting for her response. My hands were shaking slightly as I set the phone down on my desk, adrenaline coursing through my system from the confrontation. But beneath the physical reaction was a surprising sense of calm, of closure. I had said what needed to be said clearly and without the emotional outburst that had characterized our interactions in the past. I had maintained my boundaries without cruelty, but also without wavering. I took a deep breath, closed my eyes for a moment to center myself, and then went to join my son in the living room where he was arranging materials for his volcano project. His face lit up as I entered. Dad, I think I figured out how to make the lava look more realistic, he exclaimed, holding up a bottle of dish soap mixed with red food coloring. That's awesome, buddy, I said, sitting cross-legged on the floor beside him. Show me what you got so far. As he enthusiastically explained his design modifications, I felt the tension from the phone call melting away, replaced by the simple joy of being present with someone who mattered, someone worth showing up for. This, I thought, is what family should feel like. 6 months have passed since that confrontation. My parents now live in a studio apartment in the bad part of town. My mother works at Walmart, and my father delivers newspapers. They are in their 60s, starting from scratch. None of the family talks to them anymore. Ryan remains married barely. Brittany made him get a second job, and they are in counseling. He has not spoken to our parents since Brittany discovered the truth about the money. Meanwhile, Tommy and I are thriving. My business has grown 40% this year, and Tommy is doing well in school. He asked about his grandparents once, and I explained that sometimes people make choices that hurt others, and when that happens, we have to protect ourselves by staying away from them. He thought about it and said, like how I don't play with Billy anymore, because he always breaks my toys. I confirmed it was exactly like that. Last week, I ran into my aunt at the grocery store. She told me my parents had reached out to her for money, and she laughed in their faces. They called me dramatic. When I warned them about their spending, she said, now they want my help. Not a chance. The extended family has completely cut them off. Their former friends want nothing to do with them. Their church told Ryan they are not welcome at events anymore. Apparently, they try to guilt church members into giving them money. They are completely alone, and honestly, I sleep like a baby. Yesterday, I received another call from an unknown number while at my office reviewing blueprints for a new municipal project. I almost did not answer, assuming it was another sales call, but something told me to pick up. It was a social worker from the county's Department of Human Services. Her voice was professional, but kind. She explained that Robert and Carol Williams had applied for emergency housing assistance and listed me, Marcus Williams, as a relative who might be able to provide support. She was simply doing her DUA 12 diligence and exploring all options before proceeding with her application. There was a time, perhaps 1 year ago, when such a call would send me into a spiral of conflicting emotions, anger at their audacity, guilt at their predicament, anxiety about what others would think if I refused. But as I sat there in my quiet office, surrounded by evidence of the life I had built through my own efforts, I felt a strange sense of peace. I'm not able to assist them, I said simply, my voice steady. May I ask why? The social worker inquired. No judgment in her tone, just gathering information for her file. I took a moment to consider my response, wanting to be truthful without unloading years of family history on this woman, who was just doing her job. They chose not to be part of my son's life when we needed them. I finally said they made their priorities very clear through their actions. I'm respecting slow, the boundaries they established. There was a brief pause, and I could hear her typing notes. I understand, she said. Thank you for your time, Mr. Williams. That was it. No drama, no emotional manipulation, no guilt trips. Just a simple question and a simple answer. After we hung up, I sat at my desk for a few minutes, waiting for the familiar rush of complicated feelings that usually followed any interaction related to my parents. But it never came. I felt nothing. Not satisfaction at their downfall, not guilt about their circumstances, not anger about their continued attempts to use me, not even relief at having maintained my boundaries, nothing. They are just strangers now who happen to share my DNA. People whose connection to me is a biological accident rather than a meaningful bond. I returned to my blueprints, made a note to pick up Tommy's favorite ice cream on the way home, and continued with my